Good to go.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. And on behalf of the Village of Cary and the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals, I'd like to hereby call this meeting to order on this Thursday, June the 10th, 2021. The time is approximately 7:05 p.m. We have a quorum of members, and at this time, I'd like to ask our Director of Community Development, Mr. Brian Simmons, to please call the roll.
Williams? Kretschmer?
Here.
Graziano? O'Laughlin?
Here.
Nats? Jasper? Stefani?
Here.
Corey?
Here. Thank you very much, everyone. Would you rise and join us with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry. We're going to crash into each other.
So, gentlemen, before we formally begin our meeting, I have some great news to share with all of you. I think you know from yours truly that I've mentioned on a few different occasions my high regard for all of you that serve on the ZPA committee. And so if you would have watched the last board meeting, you would have noticed that you, as commissioners, have now received a pay increase.
Oh,
So you'll be receiving $50
really?
per meeting.
Nice.
So I know that's not going to affect anyone, going on a cruise or something like this, but I think it's a demonstration by the community that the value that you add to our ZPA and to the community and the good work you do. So that has been long overdue, quite frankly, because the last time the salaries were adjusted was 1998.
I was going to say, I've been making $25 a meeting for
Forever.
forever.
And Frank, while I'm thinking about this, because you weren't at the last meeting, there is a process now that you can go online, and Brian can help you with this, but there's a kind of a website you go to and create your own credentials, because they don't mail out the receipts to your paycheck. And you'll notice over the years now, you don't get a pay.
No, I just get direct deposited.
Right, but if you want to see that, like your W-2, for example, there's a place you can go and get that, and it's called Lauterbach and Amon.
Okay.
Brian can give you the long-on
Okay.
credentials to create your own account, if you choose. And if
Yeah.
you don't choose, that's your business. But I do want to say, well done, gentlemen. I think, the service that you're providing to the community is well recognized. And perhaps as a matter of, I'll leave it to your judgment if you want to say thank you to the mayor and to Brian and to Jake and also the village trustees. Those are the folks that approved it. Unanimously, I might add. So
That's very
I think
nice,
that
though.
bodes well for the committee.
Very, very
So
nice
Thank you very
of them.
much for your ongoing great work. And Mr. Simmons, thank you for shepherding that through the process. We appreciate it.
Yep, no problem.
Hey, just the price of gas alone for me to drive to every site and look around, that pays for it now.
And one other item, gentlemen, I know we discussed this briefly, but there is a new contact sheet in front of you that hopefully has everybody's updated information. I know none of the members are here, but for those of you that are, if you would just kindly double check it to make sure that we have their correct information, that's appreciated. And then we'll double check with the members that are not here. So without further ado, we have a couple of administrative items to reconcile tonight. They relate to our minutes from our last meetings. And so I'd like to do this by general consent. So I'm going to start with the first one, which was for the conditional use of the vehicle sales and rental for used dealership. And that was ZPA case 04001. And those in favor of approving those meeting minutes say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And on the second one, this is the Village of Cary. This is Brian's presentation with some updates to the Unified Development Ordinance and text amendments. Those in favor of approving those meeting minutes say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, thank you very much. Now, the next step in the process, gentlemen, is that you're probably aware that we've been working on a strategic plan for the downtown area for quite some time, actually.
Yes.
And Mr. Simmons was kind enough to give us an overview of this, which I think is terrific. And one of the things we will be doing in the not too distant future is there's another plan called the sub-area plan that you've probably read about in the newspapers, and probably sometime through the summer or perhaps into the fall. Mr. Simmons will give us an overview of that presentation as well. But tonight, we're going to be focused primarily around Cary Downtown Strategic Plan. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mr. Simmons with our thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This evening is more a presentation of the strategic plan as its final draft form. I'll go a little bit into the history of how this project came to be and the process that we went through to get to this point. But for the background for the board and the general public that may be viewing this video. The village applied for a community planning grant application with the Regional Transportation Authority back in 2018. It's a program that the RTA administers to improve access to transit throughout the Chicagoland region. It's a program that I've been able to participate in a few times throughout my career, and this first time with an application here in Cary. But they do various planning efforts to, as in this case, do full TOD type plans for communities. They also assist with improvements to providing access to transit stations, whether it be possible grants for construction of bike facilities or things like that, or also do development forums to bring developers into an area and kind of focus on what the challenges or whatnot might be for encouraging development in a downtown area and working with communities to assist with that process. So it's a very successful program. It's been run for probably a couple decades with the RTA, and several communities in the area have benefited from it. The application that we had submitted was to focus on the downtown area of Cary. Predominantly want to focus on that half-mile radius, which is kind of identified as the main crux as far as what the impacts of a transit station would be and how far people would be willing to walk to access that. The general focus is that half-mile radius, but the primary focus is looking at a quarter-mile radius around that transit station and kind of ways that we can encourage development and reinvestment in that core area. Again, trying to provide as much access to the transit as we can, but also trying to make a walkable and livable community from that perspective. And then this plan was intended to build upon recommendations that existed within the village's comprehensive plan, where there's one of the concept areas that plan focused on was the downtown, and looking to further build upon the guidance that's within the comprehensive plan and developed a more focused approach for guiding development in this area. The village, through the RTA, retained the consultant team led by the Lakota Group, which Scott Ruland is on the meeting this evening. Will provide more of an in-depth presentation of what the strategic plan recommendations and study found. Additional participants in that were Sam Schwartz, Inc., which helped with transportation analysis, more of traffic engineering firm, and Goodwin Williams Group performed more of an economic development market assessment functions within the plan. Just brief overview as far as how we got to where we're at today. Again, we submitted the application back in 2018, went through, once we received the award from the RTA, went through both the agreements phase and consultant selection process in 2019, which was finalized in April of last year. Following that RTA agreement being completed, we started the project in May of 2020, and from that time period, the last 14 months or so, we've been working on developing the plan, which is being presented to you for discussion this evening, and then village board consideration next week as well. So it's been about a 3-year process to get to where we're at this evening.
If you did this in 3 months,
Yeah,
bravo,
it was,
man.
yeah.
Wow.
Working overnight. We're working overtime. As far as how the document was guided with the help of the consultant group, we did have a project steering committee that was formed of local representatives, elected officials, transit officials as well from Metro RTA and PACE. We did have membership from School District 26 due to the nature of the Maplewood school property. I wanted their participation in the process. Mr. Corey was representative from the zoning board. And then we did have some representatives from downtown businesses and property owners that also, and the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Task Force from the village that provide additional input and insight on concepts that should be included in the plan. Throughout the last year, we've had a very extensive public output or input process. We developed a project website that was hosted by the Lakota Group that provided information for individuals to view throughout the various phases of the process. We started off holding some stakeholder meetings with local businesses, property owners, former and current elected officials back in June to get some feedback and help in understanding what some of the issues of perceptions of downtown were. And then from there started to develop the plan with the help of the steering committee and hosted a couple of community workshops throughout the process. So we had 3 workshops, one in September of last year, one in February of this year, and then finally one in May of this year as well to review the final recommendations of the plan. Tonight's objective, and throughout the presentation you see some examples of some of the concepts that are within the plan. Wanted to present the plan to the ZPA and the concepts that are recommended and some of the implementation plan that's in there, but allow Mr. Ruland from the Lakota Group will give more of an in-depth presentation on the recommendations of the plan, and then kind of next steps going forward after this evening. We'll go to the village board next week. So with that kind of overview, I'll hand it over to Scott to provide his presentation, and then be happy to answer any questions that the board may have after his presentation on the plan as well. So Scott, if you want to take it away, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Brian. If you want to allow me to share my screen, or I think you just need to stop sharing yours.
I will do that. Oops.
There you are.
Okay. That should work. Everyone can see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. All right, good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. And Scott, it's kind of weird not being able to see you, but I know you're there. I'm here, Scott Ruland, Senior Planner with the Lakota Group, happy to be here to present the final Downtown Cary Strategic Plan to you. And just a quick introduction and a project update. Brian did a good job giving you an update. I'll go into a little bit more detail on certain things, and then we'll get into the Downtown Cary Strategic Plan, overview of that, and then have a discussion, any questions you might have regarding the plan. So when we started just about a year ago in May 2020, we started our first phase, and the way we set up the process was a 3-phase process. The first was to engage the community and really to analyze the existing conditions of downtown Cary. That was completed with the submission of a State of the Downtown report and meeting with the steering committee to review that report. That launched us into the second phase, which was the visioning phase, or envisioning, to kind of vision the possibilities and big ideas for downtown and what could happen from a physical development and design standpoint. So we came up with a range of alternative site concepts that create development synergies and create connections between different sites and different areas, and then it helped the steering committee, I think the public, visualize the potential development typologies and different building form and scale that is possible downtown. And then the last phase is the implement phase, where we actually put the plan together along with the implementation strategy. A little bit on the engagement, Brian touched on a few things. Again, we had a project brand website that was able to be maintained through the course of the project. Series of stakeholder meetings last summer with a variety of participants. We had an online survey that was well replied to. And then 3 workshops. It was amazing we were able to do this project through the pandemic, still have in-person and online engagement. And I think Brian concurs that it was a great success from tackling the pandemic and still being able to get quality engagement and get the plan and the information out to the community. So we're really happy about that. We had a live workshop last September in person, and then we did a virtual workshop in February, and then just this past May we had our last final workshop again in person. We met with the steering committee along the way, and then again had final plan and public review during the course of the project. The first part of this, and this is how the report is set up more or less, is the goal and strategy framework. So this is the high-level vision, and I'll just give you a minute there to go ahead and read that. I won't read it. But this vision was developed through the course of the project, through the community engagement we received, through all the input that we received, really, and what the village's objectives were for the project. So we think this accurately characterize the vision for downtown Cary. The goals and strategy framework are divided amongst three primary themes. The first one is the development and real estate market. And the first goal is a strong market position anchored by a mix of residential and commercial activity that creates a vibrant and active downtown. So really creating a development framework, the market and the real estate market research and analysis to go out and strengthen Cary's market, strengthen the downtown from a market standpoint, and attract new investment and development. The second goal relates to the downtown Cary's physical appearance, its urban design character, how it looks, how it feels when you're there. And so the goal there, well designed, downtown exhibiting strong urban design character, maintained physical appearance, and proper integration of the design of private and public spaces. So when you switch between private and public property, the design and the idea and the theme is carried along, and you don't really notice a difference between the public and private spaces. And then the third goal relates to mobility and connectivity and really transportation, but a well-connected and accessible downtown. And of course, this means the metro station also. Downtown mobility system focused on pedestrians and bicyclists with a strategically located and sufficient parking to accommodate both metro and downtown businesses. So those are the three overarching goals. And then each of those goals, and we'll go through a few of these, each of those goals has a set of strategies that are meant to be the tasks that to carry out to fulfill the goal. So for example, the first goal, there are a few strategies here. So we want to maximize land use efficiency and density within and near the downtown core. So that's really a focus on transit-oriented development, bringing in added density, bringing in added housing, and making the best possible use or the highest and best use of each site near and within the downtown. Then there's one that relates to housing, supply and types, an active business development and recruitment and expansion program to maintain the businesses that you have, but also recruit new businesses into the downtown area. And then the organizational capacity, the partnerships with other agencies and entities that can help facilitate downtown development and improvements. And this refers to working with the Chamber of Commerce, potentially, things like a special service area or a TIF district. There's one, but those kinds of things that can help the organization of downtown, but also help with the implementation also. The second goal related to the design character, again, gets into other strategies that can help do this, making sure new development is compatible with its surroundings, with existing and adjacent development. It respects the context and character of downtown. The second strategy relates to outdoor spaces and community spaces, both public and private, for gathering and community events. Obviously, the pandemic kind of brought that into light a little bit, how important it is to be able to have outside space or community space for people to gather and socialize. So we'll look at some strategies to do that. And then the third, we have 2 5s, but that should be 6. Relates to prioritizing streetscape and landscape improvements, doing that through implementation of the streetscape plan. Design improvements, frontage enhancements along public streets. Again, that's the public and private realm, integrating those two spaces to be seamless. Encouraging building owners to facilitate facade improvements and reinvest in their building and the building stock, just to enhance its appearance and improve its physical condition. And then the last strategy that relates to downtown locations for signage, gateways, and directional or informational. It could be directional or informational signage. And that relates to an overall brand, logo, and kind of a marketing idea for downtown to really identify it as a place. The third strategy, as I mentioned, relates to transportation or mobility. So strategies related to just overall downtown mobility, improving access and connectivity. The second relates to bicycle and pedestrian improvements for bike lanes or trails or sidewalk completion, and also promoting downtown as either a regional biking destination or at least a through connection, maybe a pit stop type place for bikers on a more regional ride. Strategy 3 and 4 relate to improved station access and connections for the metro station itself, related to pace, pedestrians, transit, getting all of those modes of transportation in and out of the metro station easily. And then the last strategy relates to an adequate and sufficient parking supply, both again for metro and the downtown. And now the next slide is going to go through, and we're not going to go through all of these, but I just want to show you kind of how this plan lays out and how the hierarchy of these goals first, and then the strategy second, and now we get into the actual actions. So the specific tasks that the village will need to do to carry out the strategies that will help implement the goal. And so related to the downtown design and physical character, there's a couple here related to development principles, and those are our kind of higher overarching ideas that these apply both to downtown in general. We have some specific to the Maplewood site, but just how development should be compatible with its surroundings, how it should increase pedestrian activity, how it should be well designed, those kinds of development principles. And then the second one here is design guidelines. These are a little bit more specific on a set of design guidelines that illustrate building design, site design, and just overall scale and character of the downtown. And we'll have some examples of these. And so there's a little bit of text that goes along with each of our actions that just explains what the intent and what the purpose of these are, and if there's a reference to something in the document. Again, it just continues on. Again, just a couple more examples. Strategy 2 was related to the outdoor and community spaces. So there's an action specific to that about public plazas and spaces. We talk about Train Depot Plaza. We talk about Spring Street's Plaza that was closed off during the pandemic over the last summer. When we know that was popular with the community and it was a great space to sit outside, gather, and so maybe either partial or full-time closure of Spring Street to facilitate that. And then a Train Depot Plaza, once the old depot building is removed, we took a look at. And here's a graphic that kind of shows how that could work. Obviously it's conceptual and it's just meant to convey the idea. But there's a series of concepts in the plan that look similar to this. And they have a kind of a plan data key that highlights the number. For example, number 1 is what we're calling Spring Street Plaza North because it's north of Main Street. And then each item has a little note. 2 is the improved intersection. And then 3, the idea here is if there is a Spring Street Plaza, a formal plaza, and a Train Depot Plaza, that for larger community events, you'd have the opportunity to close off Main Street and really connect these together and have one very large plaza for community events. And so the plan just goes ahead and highlights, it gives picture examples of what that could look like, again, just to convey the idea. Here's another illustration we did, again, related to plaza space or public improvements. So this is existing conditions, Main Street and High Road. But in an after picture, if this is where the BMO Bank parking lot is, if that site was redeveloped with our proposed concept and had some new streetscape design elements, some new crosswalks, and then this is what we call just brewery plaza or a plaza outdoor seating area for the brewing company that's there, could be decorated and organized into a more formal space. Again, so this is just, again, to convey an idea of what this could look like if these development concepts were to come to fruition. We'll go into a little bit more design and development framework now. And so the previous section, again, was all goals and strategies. And the entire section follows that same hierarchy of goal, strategy, action. And then we'll see a little bit more of that in the implementation. But then it goes through there, it explains, and it gives graphic examples where it can. And then our design and development framework, this is the overview. And I know there's a lot going on this page, so I'm not expecting you to entirely take it all in. But this just knits together our different kind of sub areas that we identified in the downtown, where those key streets are that may need streetscaping improvements or priority improvements for priority streetscaping, intersection enhancements, we identify, and this is the Maplewood site, so one of our concepts we put on there, the connections into Metro and downtown, highlighting that. These different colors identify different levels of priority for the development sites, darker blue being more of a higher priority, the kind of teal or light green color being a secondary, and then the orange being more of a policy priority sites. And a policy because it's more related to infill development and smaller scale residential, maybe accessory dwelling units or those kinds of things. Things that I think first would need to be developed through policy for the village and then instituted on some of those sites if property owners were willing to, again, increase density, add smaller number of units onto there as part of infill development. We'll go into a few of these sites in a little bit more detail, but this just gives the overall. Again, here's the train station here, the big blue. The BMO Bank site, we're showing a 3-story mixed-use building. We have different concepts for that, but a substantial investment here is we think is important to transfer from a drive-through bank with a parking lot to a more developed site, a more intense site, really taking advantage of proximity to the train station. We show some things across the Northwest Highway, and as it goes into Main Street, the intersection here was a large focus, the Main Street Northwest Northwest Highway intersection. It's awkward, fast-moving traffic. We think there's some design techniques that can be done to help improve access and connectivity across, but it is certainly something that we identified for safety improvements or pedestrian improvements. So again, this just gives an overview of kind of everything. And then as we go through, we get a little bit more in detail. So this is a High Road and Main Street intersection. The BMO Bank site is here. The metro station will be right here with the tracks heading north-northwest. Here we show, actually it's a 4-story, a mixed-use building. The red indicates it would have like a commercial frontage or a commercial use. This lighter color indicates it would be a residential use. So it's just one idea. But this shows then kind of infill development along the Metro parking lot and then a more intense Maplewood development. And one of the keys here is the connections and connecting the downtown, this site and the train station to Maplewood through sidewalks, through trails, through a street network that would be connected, and through a nice landscaped, pedestrian way. So it's a pleasant walk. We added parking behind this site to make up for metro parking that maybe was lost for the development of the site, and then additional downtown parking and residential parking for this. This is just an example. So every time we go through a site scenario, we'll go through what the different concepts show. Keeping in mind there's more than one for a lot of these, although I'm just showing one. We'll give a narrative about the description and then talk about each of the concepts and then give character examples. Again, I just want to convey the idea of how the report is laid out. So we have the site scenario, we have the description of what it entails or what it would involve, and the quantitative data, how many new units, how much square footage, those kinds of things, and then some character examples through the pictures. This is then the plan view if you're looking from above. Again, same idea, highlighting with our plan data what each idea is and what each number represents. New infill development, whether it be residential or maybe commercial, mixed use, new surface parking here, and things like that. This is the Tracks Bar and Grill. And we've left that in all of our concepts. The idea being that that's kind of a downtown kind of icon or identifier. And it adds it adds character to what downtown Cary is. And so we know it's a local use, a local business. So we've kept that in all the concepts. Restaurant uses, food uses are generally activity generators and attract people to downtowns. So we think that's a good opportunity for that business to be maintained, or if they have ideas in the future, certainly that site could be redeveloped in the same kind of fashion as you move down Main Street. But for our concepts, we show Tracks staying. What I was showing you previously is West Side. Now, if we turn the camera, so to speak, and look the other direction, east, And towards the east side, this is still the same site, High Road and Main Street, with the mixed-use building here, a train station and train depot plaza. We show across Northwest Highway potential commercial use with, again, a mixed use or primarily residential building, but these would be fronting on the park and the other side, fronting away from Northwest Highway because of its noise and its disturbance. We think fronting the units on the park is a much more better idea. It would be more conducive to a living environment. We reconfigured the parking here, and then the buildings on the corner or along the eastern half of the site, we showed these as remaining with the idea that there could be some private plaza or community area in the back here that would be more kind of organically organized through the businesses there. Could be picnic tables if there's a food use or lighting and landscaping. And then the idea that where the grades become a little bit more easier to deal with here, they would kind of open up into the park, if that would be possible. This is the vacant bank site on the corner. We showed some development here, and then there's some further development on a site on North 2nd Street and West Main Street with the Villa Jones that we identified as well. All of these different sites and multiple concepts are in the plan. Again, I'm just kind of highlighting some high-level ones for you. So this is the site across Northwest Highway. Again, this site here, if you're looking from the plan view from above. So we show intersection improvements, kind of narrowing down the intersection and making the crosswalks highly visible. The existing buildings staying, and then in the back here, we've called it a revitalized active use cluster. But basically, it could be any number of things, but just a place for people to gather or have some outdoor space that would be in a more organized format. And then the parking here would help support that and support these businesses if there were some new buildings remain, but maybe new businesses come in. And then really a redevelopment of the kind of western half of this site with a new kind of residential development, as I mentioned, fronting away from Northwest Highway onto the park here, and then creating a nice pedestrian plaza or a walkway that kind of connects all these uses together. And then the plan data, again, goes through and just kind of highlights or breaks down what that would mean in terms of number of units, potential ground floor square footage, and parking. The next part of this is the design guidelines. And so we took the same concepts that we did, this should look familiar, and then added design guidelines to them. So there's a few different page spreads in the plan that go through much more detail. Again, this is just to convey the idea. We did design guidelines for urban form, so how the building should be, how high they should be, their height, their shape, how they relate to the street, the frontage conditions, the orientation, building setbacks, off-street parking and loading, and how those should be designed or looked. And so there's a set of guidelines that relate to that. The next one gets into the architecture. Again, it's the same picture, but highlighting different elements of the picture. So architecture in terms of the building architecture, facade articulation, where the windows, or what we call fenestration, where the windows are, they're properly spaced and they are well designed as well. The ground floor provides definition and is scaled to pedestrian. This one talks about storefronts and building signage, building materials, things like that. So we get into the architectural design guidelines. And then the last set of design guidelines relate to the site or the landscape design guidelines. And these are, can relate to urban design in terms of streetscape character or placemaking through streetscape elements and maybe public art or unique identity, gateway signage or things like that. We talk about pedestrian safety and comfort, so crosswalks and maintain pedestrian ways, away from vehicle ways, away from the cars. And so in the landscape buffers, particularly along roads that are traveled frequently or have heavy traffic like Northwest Highway. So the third set is about the site landscape. And then again, these are all expanded upon in the plan itself and go into much more detail. And then the last or the third section is the implementation framework and how is all this going to happen or get completed. And so what we did for each of the goals. As you recall, we had 3 goals. We had the strategies, and then we had the actions for each of those strategies. We identified the key partners and who would be in that, who would help the village make those strategies and those actions come to be a reality. What are potential funding sources for those projects or for those actions? And then what is the time frame from a short to long? Short being just 1 to maybe 2 or 3 years, a medium time frame 3 to 5 years, and then a longer is 5 plus or 6 plus years. So we again highlighted the partners, potential funding sources, and then a time frame to do that. And then you'll see these little icons here. These are just meant to identify areas that the public or we receive community input on as they think that these should be the priority. This was done in our last community workshop. Take this with a grain of salt. We had a relatively small sample size comparative to the village overall, but I think it again begins to show kind of where at least some of the people who have been involved in the project and in the process, and the people who came to the workshop, at least kind of where their priorities are. So there's one again for the first goal related to the market position. There's the next one related to the design character and physical appearance or the urban design condition. Again, strategy, action, potential partner or certain key partners, funding, and then what that time frame would be. And then the third one related to Cary's downtown transportation, mobility, and parking. And then the implementation framework in the plan itself goes again into much more detail on the partners and what their role would be, explains the potential funding sources a bit more, and goes into kind of an overall implementation plan related to potential looking at zoning modifications or parking modifications in the code, design guidelines and development principles that we talked about, things like that. And as far as next steps, we're at the end of the line here. It's been a great process. And so next week we go to the village board to do the same presentation, present the plan to them for hopefully approval and adoption. So just thank you very much. I know I kind of breezed through the presentation, so happy to refer back to any slides and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Hey, Scott, first of all, this is Patrick Corey, and I want to commend you and your entire team for an excellent project. You did a tremendous job for us here, and I personally appreciate it. Just because I've had the benefit of sitting through a number of the meetings with yourselves, could you help the gentleman just further solidify from where you sit the biggest opportunities? I know we talked about Maple, we talked about BMO, we talked about streetscaping. Just to help them try to frame this presentation, because it was, about 40 minutes or so in presentation, from where you sit, Scott, where you think the biggest opportunities are for the community. And I know you laid those out in the strategies in terms of the timelines too.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to make sure I understood you, Patrick. So you're asking to just kind of highlight some of the more of the priority actions, or?
Yeah, in other words, from where you sit, they don't necessarily have to 100% agree, because I think what we try to do is kind of narrow them down from a committee perspective. But, you do this work professionally, so I know Maplewood obviously comes up trying to redo something around the bank of BMO Bank, and then the streetscape, using those 3, and then maybe across 14. I know that was kind of a lower level priority as a couple of examples.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, let me go back to the overview. I obviously sites that the villages owns are going to be key sites and maybe rise to the top just because they have control. We think the public spaces, the plazas that have the opportunity to be one of the priority actions, and something that the village I know is moving on a little bit. And certainly with the streetscape and the public improvements related to the implementation of the streetscape plan, which is ongoing. So those just few ideas or actions are, I think, the low-hanging fruit, if you will. The Maplewood site is going to be a process and a project on its own. It's going to go through its own timeline. That will happen on its own. We've given development principles and some recommendations on how to do that, and the concepts that just to that the developer can use as basically a foundation or just a base. They're going to have their ideas and what they're going to do, but hopefully through the employment of those development principles, the Maplewood project, if and when it comes to fruition, it will be compatible and it will be something the community is proud of.
Yeah.
The BMO bank site, I mean, as far as development sites or development projects, real catalyst projects, we think there's an opportunity there. Not that we want to get rid of the bank. The bank would be a great tenant to maintain or keep in downtown. We just don't think a drive-through is the right fit, the bank drive-through. And then also they've got a very unutilized parking lot on the corner there.
Definitely.
That Main Street High Road intersection has 3 parking lots on the corners. So we think there's an opportunity to kind of try to infill development, develop some scale, some mass with some buildings, and really that will, I think, help strengthen the character of downtown. The trail or regional bike lanes, trail connections, and really that focus on pedestrian safety, I think, is another thing. IDOT will become involved, hopefully, in improvements in Northwest Highway through a safety grant, through pedestrian safety grants. If we can get money and get IDOT involved and get them to some grant money for pedestrian safety improvements or even vehicle safety improvements, we think that might be a way to help get IDOT involved and bring them along. They've been involved in some of our meetings and in this process. We'll be happy to send this plan to them when we get it adopted. But there's probably some opportunity there. But it is really an important kind of connection to try to because Northwest Highway is a barrier, right? With a physical barrier and even a perceived barrier in the railroad track. So any way we can try to break down that barrier, make people feel safe around that intersection, try to connect the uses across through visually and design treatments, and do those types of improvements to help connect the two sides, we think will go a long way. The site on the corner, there's existing building there, existing improvements, existing parking. The site's at a weird, an awkward intersection with access constraints. And so we think, maybe just bringing in a new tenant into the existing building and parking might be the best bet for that. But again, we've shown options that if somebody wants to redevelop that site, how that might be able to happen.
That's an important point. One of the committee members is kind of a subject matter expert on parking, but they're not actually here tonight. But could you just expand a little bit further? I think you were referring to the bank that's kind of at that intersection at 14 that's vacant, and the idea that was discussed. Now, I know we didn't go over that in any detail, but just for the benefit of the committee members that are here, the idea that was discussed around the bank and potentially some kind of additional parking.
Yes. I don't have the concept that shows that, so I'll do it here. The good news is Metro is relatively flexible with their parking lots, as long as they don't lose their overall number of spaces. So they're happy to swap land or develop other areas for Metro parking. And so all those Ps you'll see on here are all potential areas where we could have additional parking. And I think this area here best illustrates it, because if we took some area Metro land for development and we'd have to replace that parking. And so we kind of show that, obviously, if we have residential units there, we're going to need some parking for them. But this just goes into kind of making Metro whole. So taking a little bit from here, but let's add it here. They're generally within visual distance of their parking or their station. They're okay with the parking wherever it is. We also had an idea for a parking garage on this site, where you would access actually from First Street, come in and then access the site through here. And because of the grade changes, it might be possible, certainly didn't engineer this or anything, but we know with the grade changes and how parking decks work, it might be possible to come in and then drive right into a parking deck at the top floor or the upper level, and then build that into this site. And so, and then with the improved pedestrian connection, then you have Metro parking here as well. So it was kind of the way we looked at it was not really eliminating it, but swapping it, making it more accessible, just through on-street parking, through signage, through striping, through bulb outs and things you can do with the pavement and curb cuts and things like that. Just making on-street parking more visible and more accessible. Never really heard that there was much of a parking problem downtown. I think there's a perceived problem and people just wanting parking to be proximate to their destination. And so that's why we've tried to look at parking through a number of different ways: street parking, new lots, maybe in some locations, supplemented metro parking, things like that. There's also some opportunity here or in back here that we didn't identify that are talked about in the plan itself, but there might be other locations here where parking could, again, be more formalized within the block, within this block behind the buildings, or more formalized in this area here.
Thank you very much, Scott. Let me see if the gentlemen that are assembled here have questions for you. So any questions for Mr. Wu and gentlemen?
So Scott, this is Frank O'Laughlin. Actually, thank you, because you answered a lot of my questions on parking and with the swap and all that, because that was kind of my concern too. It's where are we going with parking here? We're going to add a lot, and where are we going to gain back others? So that really took into effect. Understanding that, the whole concept plan, it came out great. So to you and your team, bravo, very good work. But my question to you is, I know that the north side of 14 is not an immediate, it's a secondary, but at some point, when we're looking at the things, like you said, the things we can do now, which is stuff that the village owns, what concepts or thoughts do you have on the, in looking at the plans, I see the potentials for crosswalks and things like that, but crossing 14 is a nightmare on foot. So is it just crosswalks, or has anything else been considered?
Well, we didn't really get to the point where we're thinking about bridges or underpasses. The idea was floated, yeah. We didn't do any concepts that show a bridge or underpass. Obviously to totally avoid the intersection and just bypass it, right? Just because the investment in that we think is too great, and the clearances to try to do something that would have to be ADA accessible and get across that wide intersection, we didn't really think it was feasible in the long term.
Okay, no, I just wanted to know, just an opinion of trying to walk the street, or can we go under or over?
Frank, I can tell you that, because I participated in the committee, that issue came up quite a bit. And I think Scott just identified that, at the end of the day, it was kind of a matter of priority. I think it's still in the plan, but I think there's a number of elements that can go before it, that's all.
Yeah, no, I think there is too. I just think let's not build everything and then go, oh, we really could use a bridge, but we have no place to put it now.
Yeah, I'll jump on that area as well. I think, we know that intersection is problematic from a pedestrian standpoint. You're not comfortable if you're walking past that, crossing the street, unless you really understand how it operates.
Right.
And if you're a family with young kids, it might not be as, you'll go somewhere else before you cross there, just by how it feels. And I think, we're working with IDOT. IDOT knows we have concerns with it. It's, was designed prior to current regulations for pedestrian access and whatnot. There are elements or ways that you might be able to improve it to make it feel safer, with different pavements for crosswalks and things like that, or working with IDOT on that. The issue is with its proximity to the train tracks, is if a train comes through, it preempts the signal. So that doesn't impact how you can do improvements from a pedestrian element as far as crosswalks.
Well, exactly. You're halfway across the intersection and the train comes and now it's green.
Yeah, right. So there's those components that we would have to explore in deeper detail. This plan identifies that, yes, we have identified this area needs further study or improvement, but certainly that those discussions would continue on in the future with IDOT and the other agencies that would be involved in potential enhancements of that area.
And what we could do. Okay.
Yeah. And one highlight too, just to indicate, the way I look at this plan overall is kind of for the downtown, and think of it as a puzzle. And if you're building a puzzle, you don't start with the middle and work your way out. There's pieces that you put together in different components that eventually come together to make the final picture. And I think if you think of it in that perspective, there's not one site or one element that the village would start with or the development community would start with, but those pieces will eventually come together if you start to have enough of them and momentum going that things will keep moving in a direction that you'll eventually get to the final picture that you want. So, we've had some discussions with the development community, property owners in this area. There is some interest in development. Obviously, Maplewood's under contract now. That may be a piece that comes in first, even before you do something in the downtown area. But there is some interest in other properties in the downtown area as well that potentially could go forward, or the village may do improvements for plazas and things like that to pick off some of the elements in here as well.
Well, and I think when you were talking about the low-hanging fruits of some of these plazas and stuff, I think that almost attracts developers to come in and do something because it looks a lot better. The plazas look great. I want that building, but I want it to tear it down and put something more feasible for what I want to do.
Right. And to that effect too, this plan doesn't say that we're doing a clean slate.
Oh, no. I understand that. Yeah, no, I understand that.
And I understand. I think we heard throughout the planning process, and Scott can, back this up. There's people like downtown Cary. Obviously, it has a quaintness to it. There's character and charm to it. You don't want to see that go away as development comes in. You want to make sure that the new development, if there is new development, it's cohesive with that and works with that, so that with the way the plan is developed, there are opportunities for infill, potential to increase density, but they didn't identify there's opportunities where if you don't redevelop, looking at the north side of Route 14, kind of along the corner of Main and Crystal that backs up to Veterans Park. Certainly, you could redevelop that and have a more larger mixed-use project or, potentially a denser residential project. But if that doesn't happen with the plan, there's a way to identify that maybe you can reimagine the space behind those buildings right next to the park that creates kind of a gathering space that those properties can benefit from.
Right.
So that it kind of is an extension of the park and, it utilizes that space. So there's different elements in here that, this plan might recommend something for a particular site, and the development community, maybe 15 years down the line before they realize that, yes, we'd agree that site's available for a development. So this just kind of lays the framework for the overall policy as far as how the village would look at the downtown, encouraging some of these elements, and then, see what happens piece by piece, as you come in to finish that puzzle.
Oh, no. And I completely agree, Brian. I think like with what Scott was saying, with the low-hanging fruit, you bring that in, then you do probably attract a few more, you definitely attract maybe some more developers that would come in and whether it's tear down a building or redevelop one of the old structures to make it more feasible for business and retail and or above residential. It's a great plan. It's a really great plan. So I just, like I said, my biggest concern was when we get to a certain point, that 14 crossover is just going to scare the life out. I don't do it. I don't walk across that street unless, it's the Memorial Day parade and they got it shut down. That's about it.
Right. Yeah. And being in the planning profession and kind of a transportation planner in a previous life, if you will, I've walked through that intersection, understand how it operates. So, I have more of a comfort feel for how the signal would operate and, know if I press the button, what I can cross and what the impacts of that are. But if somebody is not familiar with that, it's intimidating to cross that location. So it's just the nature of Route 14 being a strategic regional arterial. It's designed to move traffic regionally. So you have a lot of truck traffic and things going through there, and the curve in that bend, does cause issues. But, for pedestrians to cross, yes, it is an impediment from that perspective. And the village understands that. We identify that, and there's limited opportunities to correct that without a major reconstruction of the roadway, but certainly we're looking to work with IDOT in ways to, fix some of that situation the best we can.
Cool. Thank you, sir.
Brian, just real fast, the steering committee, what was that selection process like? Was that just appointed, or how do these people come about
Yeah,
Who
so
determined it?
that's a good question. So staff kind of identified when we do these type of projects, individuals that have worked with the village or people that would be beneficial to have on this, and it depends on what the specific topic is that's being reviewed. So the comprehensive plan, when the village went through that process more than 5 years ago, there was a committee that was developed for that, and it was looking at leaders in the village. So we had participation from the park district, school districts, Chamber of Commerce, and, from that perspective to participate in that. With this plan, it was more focused on the downtown. So we did include some property owners and business owners that had been active with the village. There were some that we reached out to that were not interested just due to timing and, conflicts with their interests. So just tried to get a wide scope of feedback on the plan, so we're not focused specifically on, the political ideas of it, but looking at what the community, may feel, and try to get a broader picture from that perspective. So we worked with, from a staff level, put together a list and, kind of, contact individuals based on that to, put the list together and had feedback from the mayor and the village board as well.
So when you guys had all of these, talking to all the residents, the 3 showings that you guys were talking about, how many residents actually came by to, was there a decent amount, like hundreds?
Yeah,
Like,
the meeting that we had in September,
Yeah.
it was very well attended. Actually, it was, and Scott alluded to it in, his discussion, but, we did this entire project during the entire pandemic. So we had to adjust from a planning perspective. You want to have open houses where you can meet and greet people, and there's limits on how we could do that due to the nature of the pandemic that's going on. So the September open house we did was outdoors downtown. We had in Spring Street. We had roughly, I'd say, a little over 100 people attended that. Just walking through the downtown. It was a gorgeous day. So we had a positive turnout. We had an online webinar that we did in February, just because it was hard to do an outdoor a workshop in the middle of February. So that was online. We actually had, I think, 30 or 40 people participate in that, where the consultant team walked through the concepts, and we had feedback via Zoom meeting. And I was very happy with how many people attended that as well. And then the final open house that we had in May, that we had between 50 and 70 people attend that. It was a very windy day, so there weren't as many people in the downtown area, but very happy with the response as far as people that came out to participate. But we did also have the website and surveys that were part of that we did have a number of people participate online, throughout the process as well. And I don't know if Scott, if you have numbers as far as how many people registered on the website, but we did have some good participation from that perspective.
I might have it here.
all right, while you look that up, I'm going to ask another question.
Sure.
But I have one comment for you,
Yeah,
Anthony,
go
is
ahead.
that, because I had the benefit of
Yeah.
being at some of these presentations, is that Scott, Lakota Group, they were actually taking input from the residents, because there were presentations around the.
Correct.
So people could see the presentation you're reviewing tonight as an idea, and they were actually commenting on, and Lakota Group was actually taking their input and incorporating their input into the presentation.
Correct.
So that was a really good outcome of those presentations, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, yeah, that absolutely. What's the average age of Cary? Do you know, Brian?
I forget what the demographic, it's probably, I want to say, and you put me on the spot here, I think it might be late 30s.
Late 30s?
Yeah.
Okay.
And because you have a wide demographic.
Yeah. Oh, of
The
course.
population's been aging over time.
Yeah.
I don't know what the recent census numbers are, because we don't have the result yet, but there's a trend that, is starting to, some of the, I won't say long timers, but long residents of the villages that are upper in age, empty nesters, maybe selling more of their properties and have a younger demographic coming back in the community. But there is, as far as the market assessment that was performed as part of this project, there's a demand for different housing types in the community.
Yeah.
For people that live in the community and want to move out of their homes and be, they're empty nesters and want to downsize.
Yep.
But they're also for younger professionals that are, starting out their careers to have a place that they can rent or afford. It's just, in the community, there's not new housing from that perspective that they generally can acquire as well. So there's a demand for that in the area, not just in Cary, but in the region as well. In McHenry County, there hasn't been much of that constructed.
And when you guys were collecting the feedback, were you also collecting demographic data as well to kind of compare it against, or was it just more of, I'm just taking your comment and kind of going from there?
Yeah, it was more, I don't think we got the demographic information as far as who attended, but
Okay.
I would say from the people that I spoke to at the meetings, it was a wide spectrum. So the last open house meeting that we had, we actually had some of the, was it Ms. Carey, participants came out to the meeting, were there, so we had a young demographic of
Yeah.
junior high school kids, all the way through seniors as well that live in the community and been here for a long time. So wide demographic mix is not just focused on one age group that came out and participated.
That's it.
Well, just to add on to that, we did do, as part of our original, the state of the downtown through our existing conditions, we did do a bit of a demographic analysis and was included in that report as far as our existing conditions. And some of that informed what's in the plan, but we didn't carry that forward and put the demographic analysis in the final plan.
I remember seeing that too, Scott. I just couldn't, off the top of my head, recall it, but it was in one of the early presentations. And my recollection is that your colleague, was it Kevin or Michael? Forgive me if I got their names wrong, but I remember someone going over that in some detail.
Didn't you guys also talk about possibly working with IDOT on trying to get rid of, I hate to say this, the old Village Hall, when talking about reconstructing
Straightening out the
14?
curve,
Yeah, straightening
yeah.
the curve out?
So,
Or did I
yes.
just hear that from somewhere else?
So that would be, again, if you look at that intersection just by the kink that's in Route 14, if you do a significant improvement at that intersection, that widens the roadway, it may impact, some of those buildings that are in that location. So with this plan, it, identified that, those buildings are kind of the history of Cary. So, certainly you can try to work with them and keep them and work, in the backyard of them, next to the park to enhance that. But if, IDOT does come in and needs to do a larger improvement, that may impact, those buildings. And there may need to be some property acquisition as part of that, but it really depends on the scope and scale of that project, if that were to come to be. But certainly that would be part of a larger reconstruction effort of the roadway to figure out if more land needed to be acquired to reconfigure that roadway.
So that's outside of this. Somewhat outside of it.
From the small, minute
Yeah.
concept point, we
Okay.
didn't get to that level of detail, but certainly this looks at, okay, the intersection's been identified, it's kind of a pinch point, there needs to be, some work done to, potentially improve the safety or perception of safety at that intersection, and that there's multiple ways that, you can skin the cat, if you will, as far as, trying to address those issues. If it's a full-blown reconstruction, maybe it does acquire additional property. Maybe there's other, smaller enhancements you can do to improve the safety and the feel of safety at intersections so people feel more comfortable crossing there.
That absolutely came up a number of times, Anthony, and I think it kind of get into the prioritization of things because, you get into
for sure.
IDOT and, you get into the whole state. So it absolutely came up. And even the planners that are on the line with us, they were of the same mind that we are. Frank, I said the same exact thing you did. I've never once crossed that intersection. I've lived here now 18 years, and I wouldn't even consider it. So that's just the way it is. But it came up all the time, and it's a big project.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it
But
involves a lot of entities.
Yeah, and if you looked at straightening the road, which has been talked about for 20 years at least, then one of your biggest concerns is the original Village Hall. I mean, that's a big piece of history.
Yeah.
So what do we do? Do we move the building somewhere, and then where do we move it to? Because you don't want to just tear it down. It's building number one, so there's a lot to it, and really almost out of our hands as a village, because it'll come down to what IDOT says, this is what we're going to do with the road.
Gentlemen, were there other questions for Mr. Rulin while we have him on the line?
No.
So Scott, I would just want to commend again you and your team. I thought the presentations you did from beginning to end were really, first rate. And I know you do this professionally, but I was highly impressed with all of the presentations, and it was really a privilege to work with you and the team. So thank you, and I wish you every success with your next meeting with the village board.
Thank you very much. It was, we enjoyed this process and working with the village and Carrie and the steering committee and Brian very much.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we appreciate the effort on your part and we're happy with how the plan turned out.
Yeah.
And I will say, from a staff perspective as well, we're very happy with the process and how it played out in light of the recent circumstances we had. And, this is the first time we've ever done a long-range plan, even from a consultant standpoint during the pandemic. So it presented a number of challenges, obviously, which everybody, had to adapt to this last year. But I do want to say, Scott and his team and the rest of the consultant team was a very well-informed group, had some good insights as far as ways that we can improve the downtown. Even from the steering committee and the village perspective, we did get a number of positive input on the plan from different perspectives as well. I do want to just call out to, I know Courtney Sage from our Public Works Department is on observing the meeting here as well. She's very quiet in the background, but she did participate in the process as well, and just want to identify her as also participating in the process, and feedback that she had in the plan was beneficial as well. So
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah.
And I do see that was Sam Schwartz was a traffic consultant. I've worked with them on other projects at my job. They do great work. So I feel very confident in what they've recommended. So.
yeah, it was a very good team. We're happy with. I've worked with all three of the firms in the past and other positions I've had in my career that very satisfied with the work they've done in other communities and also here. I think this plan will be a good footprint for the community going forward as far as. Again, developing that puzzle for downtown.
So, Mr. Simmons, for the benefit of the members that are here, do you want to comment a little bit further on what's the recent developments regarding Maplewood? So they just have a kind of a frame of mind of where we are, potentially future meetings?
Sure, I can give an update. So if the members of the zoning board are aware, the School District 26 is under contract with a developer for the property.
Nice.
They, I want to say in February of this year, executed the contract so that that developer has 9 months or until the end of this year to do their due diligence. So they're looking at the site and kind of figuring out what they potentially can do there. And then beyond that time period, they have another, I think, 8 months of time period under their contract to get zoning entitlements for the property. So it could be another year out before anything formally gets approved by the village for that project. But at least it's under contract. They have recently reached out to the village from a staff perspective just to begin discussions with us as far as what their idea or potential vision is for the site. They've already researched our comprehensive plan, this plan as well. So they have an idea of what the village's future vision is for that property, and they're trying to align as much as they can with that as well. So we'll see kind of next steps, how that progresses. Obviously, there'll be some multiple discussions before the village board, and probably when the public hearing process starts with this board as well, before that project gets formally reviewed and approved. But it'll be probably the next year time period, we'll have some more significant discussions on that property.
Could be quicker, really, because when you're talking due diligence, there's not, I mean, that's when you get into your environmental and all that, and there's not a whole lot there. It's been a ball field forever.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's their contract gives those time periods, but certainly could be
Yeah,
shorter.
I mean, your contracts can always go shorter.
Right,
on
right,
those
right.
deals.
But it's certainly, there's, they're interested in the property, the company's based out of Pennsylvania. They're starting to expand in this area. They've done several multifamily developments similar to sites like this that, they expressed their interest in the site as it's almost a green field, property. From that perspective, it's relatively flat, so there's not many development challenges to it from a design perspective. Obviously, there's issues that we would need to work out with how their development coexists with the neighborhood that exists around that now, and that's part of any planning process or development process. But that is starting. We're at the our 5-yard line going to the opposite end zone at this point. So we're very initial on the drive to, see if the project can be completed there.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. And gentlemen, before we conclude that part of our meeting, did you have any other questions for Mr. Simmons around?
I thought, yeah, I'm good. I thought the presentation was great. Thank you again, Scott and Brian, for putting and working on all this.
And we'll be doing another one, Frank. There's the other one that we talked about, that sub-area plan that we'll try to get into discussion before the end of the year.
What's that?
The sub-area plan. So if you think, yeah.
So the village recently, we're separate of this project, we're working on another project with CMAP for the Route 31 corridor.
Oh, okay.
So we looked at I pointed at you for the Meyer material sites that are in that area. The plan was developed as we knew that those were coming offline. We worked with Algonquin to coordinate a plan that spanned both of our villages.
Yes.
And that included another steering committee of other representatives from different agencies, and that plan was adopted by the board, village board, in May. And then similar to this, I want to present that plan to this committee here so you're aware of it and kind of the recommendations that are within that plan.
I've heard quite a bit about it,
Yeah.
not just, on
Right.
other ends, yes.
Right. So it's kind of, that plan again looks at the Route 31 corridor, similar to this plan looks specifically at downtown. That plan looks at the Route 31 corridor from, essentially Walmart on the north down to downtown Algonquin on the south, and provides recommendations for how to encourage development in that area.
Well, and really, when you look at that kind of a situation, you're no different than a downtown Crystal Lake and a Route 14. We have downtown Cary and a Route 31. It's,
Right. And it's just, future presentation, I'll get more detail as far as, similar to what Scott did in this presentation, as far as what the recommendations are of that plan and how it could impact development, and then, potentially, things that would be reviewed by this board going forward.
Cool.
I just wanted to get you a taste of this. So there's been a lot of work going on through the pandemic.
No, that one I know about. So.
Yeah, well, you amongst most people would know about it. But the way it would get segmented, Frank, is that it's kind of near-term, medium-term, very long.
Very long-term, yeah. No, I know.
The whole essence of it. And, it's kind of like a blank slate right now, and we'll see where it takes us.
Right.
So, okay, so before we move on, any other questions around those couple of items? No. So, Mr. Simmons, the other question I had for yourself was future meetings, and I know there was a little bit of, we weren't sure if this meeting was going to take place the last time, but is there anything hitting your pipeline now?
Yes, I have one zoning application that was submitted for July 8th. So we will have a hearing on that evening. And then, so at least one case, depending on how many other cases come in, I may add the Route 31 study to that evening for discussion. But there will be a July 8th meeting. And then I have a couple other petitions I've discussed with the developers that may fall that time or may be in August, but likely we'll have the next 2 meetings for sure.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right,
Understand
gentlemen,
and
so-
schedule my baseball games appropriately.
It's only one day you got to modify now versus two.
Hey, I have taken a meeting while a game was going on in the dugout.
This past year was interesting, that's for sure.
All right, gentlemen, unless there's anything else, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Scott.
Scott.
Yep.